to participate and help out at the Hotline call center next Tuesday. We will be sharing this PowerPoint afterwards, and of course have our contact information. So if you have any questions that come up after the training, please do reach out to ask. And look forward to working with you all next week. So I know we're running a little late, so I'm gonna jump right on in and try to cover this information rather quickly. And okay, so the goal today of our training will be done in 3 parts. And the first goal is to understand the overall structure of election protection. Second part is to understand your role as a hotline volunteer. And the third goal is really being able to navigate the resources that'll help you answer the most common questions and make sure that we're properly recording the information from the calls that we receive. So jumping into the structure of election protection, sorry, once again, the same goals. We are the largest nonpartisan voter protection coalition, over 100 organizations that include local CBOs, voter advocates, and other volunteers such as yourself. We strive to make sure every eligible voter who wishes to cast a ballot can do so. And just so you all know, election protection actually began after the 2000 Florida election when we saw the debacle that occurred in Florida. And the point of election protection was really to help voters resolve problems on election day or get the information they need to make sure they're able to vote properly. And this has actually evolved into a year-round effort to improve election administration. As we see that a lot of these problems actually can be best prevented ahead of time by working with election officials and passing better laws. So the election protection suite of hotlines, if you will, it comprises of 3 language lines, one in English, the 866-R-VOTE, another one in Spanish, and the 888 API vote that you all are helping to volunteer for. And we do, have the ability to assist voters in Chinese, both Cantonese and Mandarin, Korean, Vietnamese, Tagalog, Bengali, Hindi, and Urdu. The 888 API vote is both a resource for callers who are reporting a problem that they're experiencing, but also those who are just seeking information, maybe asking questions. So really, we find that calls come in can be sort of run the gambit between simple to more complex type questions. So our goals in the hotline is first and foremost to assist voters, right? That is, in fact, our #1 goal, is to assist the individual voter you're talking to. You will have the resources, which we'll go through in a little bit, to help answer their questions, as well as other people in the room that can help you if the questions are a little bit more complex. Also, we may get calls from partner organizations who are on the ground and in the field who may be trying to assist a limited English proficient voter and may be calling our hotline to get interpreter assistance. And finally, our goal is to record the data, record these calls into the R-VOTE Live database. Data collection is a critical part of the election protection program because it really powers our advocacy after election day and enables folks in the field to know where the problem places are so that they can send field volunteers to those locations to try to resolve the issues on the spot. Moving on to your role as a volunteer. So you are at the call centers, you'll be answering phones in the call center and inputting the information into the database. And as mentioned, if there is a question that comes on the phone calls that you don't know the answer to and can't find or easily resolve with the resources you have, you can ask me, Terry, or Christine, who will be serving as your call center captains. So we also have on standby some remote volunteers if we don't have the needed language assistance in-house at the call center at the time. And so we'll be able to patch people through three-way if needed to assist with interpreting. So just to go over some of the common election vocabulary, we know we use a lot of election terminology even when we don't mean to, so we just want to run through quickly some of these important terms that you'll likely hear a lot of. So one is absentee ballot, which is the ballots cast by mail ahead of Election Day, early voting sites, election officials, polling places, poll monitors, poll workers, provisional ballots, and voting machines. These are all somewhat self-explanatory, but sometimes have very unique distinctions. And so if you have any questions of other vocabulary that comes up that you are not familiar with, do not hesitate to ask and ask any clarifying questions that you have either before or on Election Day. So for your shift, please arrive on time. And in fact, I would urge folks to try to get there a little bit earlier, maybe 5–10 minutes earlier if possible, both to get through security in the building as well as signing in and signing the various release and code of conduct paperwork that you will need to do before getting to start, answering calls and helping voters, and then of course logging those information into the Our Vote Live OVL database. And then we also stress that before you answer another call, it's best to take about that 90 seconds to make sure you're entering the information in and regrouping for the next call. I can tell you from experience, you think, oh, let me just take care of these couple calls and I will enter it in afterwards. But very often what happens is things can pile up and you end up losing maybe some information or whatnot if you don't take care of it right away. So your setup on Election Day, you'll have a phone and you'll have a computer with bookmarks for various resources. There'll also be a job aid with a sample start and end script and login information. And then on the walls, as you see in our picture here from our 2016 hotline, you'll see handouts or large Post-it notes on the walls with important reminders, or if things come up that day, because things can move very quickly on Election Day, where there are problems, litigation might be invoked to make sure that certain practices are stopped and whatnot. And so we'll have that information that's very up to date on the walls or on handouts as needed. So an anatomy of call is that there are about 5 phases to each call. So it starts with a welcome and a request for contact information. And this is really to make sure that if you get cut off for whatever reason, you're able to reach back out to the voter who called in. Next, you ask about the problem. You research and find possible solutions, help resolve the problem, and then once again, finish out by inputting the information into the call database. So in answering calls, sort of you're sort of a mini script, if you will. So the example we have is, thank you for calling Election Protection. This is Rose. Can I please have your phone number in case we get connected? Okay, what is your name? How can I help you? So some of the do's as a hotline volunteer. If you're asked, identify yourself as a trained volunteer. Obtain as much identifiable information as possible. Name, zip code, and polling location are important. If a caller refuses to provide identifying information, do not persist and provide the voter with necessary assistance. Always input ethnicity, language, or race into the database. Ask the caller how she or he heard about the hotline and put that in the additional information box. This is particularly important for us at the 888 API vote hotline because we're trying to make sure that we're getting the number out to folks in ways that are useful and are actually getting into people's hands. And then again, remember to log all information into Our Vote Live. Some of the don'ts is do not enter any personally identifiable information in a field in Our Vote Live that says publicly available, because as indicated, that information will be publicly available. We do not want people's personal information out in the public like that. Do not engage in any partisan conversation while volunteering with election protection. Election protection is nonpartisan, and so this includes behavior in the call center. Please do not wear candidate or partisan clothing, buttons, etc., and avoid any support or opposition to candidates in your conversations with voters and each other, despite the politically charged nature of the day. if a caller asks whom to vote for, say you cannot answer that question. So also know that not everybody who calls in is necessarily a voter. So use your resources to try to help as best you can and record the information in OBL. And if you have any questions or if you have some doubt, come find me or Christine, to address the issue. So once again, if you don't know the answer, or if you just feel uncomfortable with dealing with the caller, please come find us. Don't mention any of the calls on social media. And if you need to leave your station for a break, please let one of the captains, me or Christine, know if you need to leave, so that we can basically tell the system to stop sending calls to your phone. And then when you get back, please let us know so we can reset that. And then if at any point the phones around you are ringing and it's been more than 2 minutes and a call has come into you, you might want to check with the captain to make sure that your phone is set to receive calls. And then again, just to reiterate what was said before, you are a trained volunteer. So avoid, if you happen to be an attorney or a law student, avoid talking about being a lawyer or a law student. Don't say the word client, and basically we do not want to establish any type of attorney-client relationship or the perception of such. So once again, notes to remember, this is nonpartisan, so no nonpartisan t-shirts, buttons, or other paraphernalia. The EP field volunteers, partner groups, and campaign volunteers may call into the hotline to report problems. This information should also be included and entered into the Our Vote Live database. And once again, just letting us know if you need a break when you're back, and then not referring to yourself as a lawyer or to the voter as a client. So quickly, just so you know, here are some of the common issues that come up on calls that we get. It's not a comprehensive list, but really just provides an overview of the most common issues you'll likely run into, so that so that you have a sense of the types of questions that come in. So where do I vote? Am I registered to vote? The poll workers are telling you to go to another polling place. They say that they say that the voter's not actually on the book, in the books or on the list. That they never received their absentee ballot, asking for ID, but they don't have one on them. And you're either trying to help translate the ballot for a relative, a friend, or you're the voter calling in saying that you brought someone to help translate the ballot for you, and the poll workers won't let them in. And then folks sometimes will get calls from people who actually requested an absentee ballot and then decided that they actually wanted to vote in person on election day. So next, we will move into tools and resources. And this is really the meat of sort of what you'll be looking to and looking at to try to help these voters. So you will have the Our Vote Live page pulled up on your computer. That will have a polling place locator. There's also an online toolbox, which is a one-stop shop for resources you need. You'll have a voter registration lookup, polling place lookup, again, and frequently asked questions. And often a lot of the calls can be answered going straight to the frequently asked questions. Once again, you have the call centers. If you need any assistance, you are not alone in this. And ask follow-up questions. There's often more to a story than first appears, or you might need more info to help the voter than they think you do. So please do not hesitate to follow up with questions to the voters to fully understand the situation that's occurring. And I'll give you an example of a call that I took during one of the elections. I was talking to a gentleman in Cantonese, and we were talking about, he was asking about registering to vote, and it was election day. And so I initially thought, oh, well, I'm sorry, you had to register by a certain date. And if you hadn't, you're not able to vote. He was calling in from New York, so they did not have same day registration. And so we, and so we were about to get off the call, and he mentioned something about voting for Obama during the last presidential election. And so I realized, wait a minute, one of the follow-up questions I needed to ask was, I'm sorry, did you say you voted in a previous election? And so with that, we determined that he was already registered, that he was in fact still on the voter registration list. And he still had about an hour, hour and a half to get to his polling place to be able to cast the ballot. So I was able to get him that information, and he was able to go. And so that's a good example of where if if he hadn't made that comment, then I would have missed that opportunity. So just an encouragement to ask follow-up questions just to make sure you understand, the full situation and all the facts that could be at play. So our Vote Live that I've mentioned a number of times so far is the online reporting system. The information collected from hotline calls, as well as field volunteers, is entered into the database. And so the reports will be analyzed throughout the day and sort of in a rolling basis in real time to identify what issues voters are facing and what needs additional action. This information is also used post the election to be able to help either develop new policies that can make voting more accessible to people, and or evidence and anecdotal evidence to be able to indicate why certain policies should be pursued. So it's really important that the data is entered accurately, and as I mentioned, in real time, right? We want to try to capture as much data as possible. It helps with follow-up on election day, as well as I mentioned, following up to improve future elections. And it's important to see this information in real time because it allows the election protection leadership to follow up, not just follow up with the individual voter, but also identify potential trends that might be happening. So for example, if we have calls coming in and we've gotten 10 calls about a particular problem at a polling place, then we know that it's not a one-off issue with a particular voter, but there's actually a systemic problem at that polling place that could be resolved by either calling the election officials in that county or perhaps reaching out to field volunteers who might be in the area who could then go there directly and address the issue there in real time. At a minimum, we want to be able to collect for each ticket that we take an address, since nearly all election information depends on the county and state someone lives in. We really need this information to answer pretty much any question and to do any follow-up analysis. Also, the category of the call. Without the categorization, it's impossible to get a snapshot of the calls that we're getting in any particular area or nationwide. So we really need to know the types of issues that are popping up to spot trends, as I mentioned, and we can only do that if the calls are properly categorized. We have mentioned this before, race is a key data point. We understand that asking about race can sometimes be a little bit uncomfortable. So we do have a proposed script here for anybody who might be a little bit uncomfortable asking, or if somebody were to push back. If you were to ask sort of, well, why do you need that information? So really, we're saying we're trying to better understand the communities we're serving. So in this case, it would the question that follows it would be, would you mind sharing with me what race or ethnicity you identify with? So with that language, you're clearly giving them an out to say that they don't want to answer it, but it also gives some context as to why we're asking the question. For our purposes, if the call comes in on a language line, you can skip this question, but note that the call was a Chinese call or Vietnamese call, and so forth. So with that, we're going to go through some screenshots about what our Vote Live will look like, so you have a sense of what you'll be seeing when you come in on Tuesday. So when you sit down, you might be asked for a username and password. If so, that information will actually be at your station or on the wall, and it's actually universal for the whole call center. So every single one of you will be using the same username and password if you're asked. Most of you, though, will sit down and will actually be asked for your name and email address. And so that's really just to make so that we can understand who's entering in which ticket, so that if there's some follow-up that's needed, we'll know who to follow up with. And then if you sit down and aren't actually asked for either of those things, click on the Not You button at the top to log out of the previous volunteer and then enter your information in. So another way, so the next thing you'll look at and when you start is that you'll see the tabs at the top. It tracks the life of a call, if you will, from left to right. So you'll start at start, right, and then move on to voter information. You can, of course, jump back and forth between these tabs, but this sort of gives you a progression of how you can collect the information. So the expectation is that you're actually documenting calls in real time as you're talking to voters on the phone. So you'd first ask when a call comes in, the caller for their phone number. So you type the phone number in, and it'll often give you an option to create a new ticket. When you hit find or create a ticket, 3 possible outcomes will happen. You'll either create a new blank ticket, and that is, so if this is a new call that's come in. If you're continuing a current ticket, so there's already a ticket that's been created for that number, then you'll proceed in that fashion, or the caller doesn't actually want to give the number. So in creating a new ticket, right, you will first, it'll be a new blank ticket because there are no other tickets associated with the number. So you'll ask the caller for their name and type that in so you know who you're talking to. Then you can ask the person how they can help you. So at that point, you'll have both their name and you'll have their phone number. At some point in the conversation, to help with pretty much any voting question, you're going to need to know the voter's city or county and state at a bare minimum. If you can, try to get their full address and include that in the address section. But at a minimum, as stated, please get at least the city or county and state, as election procedures may vary actually at the county level and at the state level. Then hit the save button. You must hit save or this information will disappear. The save also tells the system to standardize the address, which is critical for our ability to follow up on these issues. Save also helps because it will pull what county the voter lives in, which is sometimes very useful to resolving questions. Take a look at what the system pulls as the address and double check that it's correct. If it's not, you can override it by clicking on that's not right. And finally, at the bottom of each page, you'll see an issues detail field. That's to make sure that no matter what part of the conversation in, you can always add information about the voter's question, details about the situation, and what you did to help them. Don't worry about spelling or punctuation, but we do want to make sure that every ticket has basic information about the voter's question and what you did to help. And as if this is a more serious or complicated issue, please also include details about the problem. So for example, for a polling place lookup, it's fine just to put PP lookup. But for other issues, you'll want to include more details. So, for example, if you were having an issue with a poll worker not letting you the voter bring someone in of their choice to vote, you would want to collect that information, that was the problem, who they were trying to bring in to vote, what the poll worker said or did, and so forth. And once again, you can move between tabs, so you can move forward, but you can also move backwards if you need to go back and correct something. All right. So next, if this is a polling place lookup issue, or if they're having a problem at the polling place, you can find the polling places easily within our Vote Live. Once you've saved the voter's full address in that initial screen, you can just hit look up polling place in the polling place tab, and it'll pull up the voter's polling place in the vast majority of states. So this can be used to share the voter's polling place with him or her, or to document and save it for a polling place problem, like a poll worker sharing misinformation or a long line. In many places, the election official will ask for the precinct or ward or division or district number when we call to report the problem. So if you've already entered the voter's address and found the polling place, please also click look up precinct so the data saves as well. And you may also have the option for manually entering all of these fields if you get the information from the state website or the voter. But if you do that, please don't forget to hit save. Okay. Right. So once again, you'll have an opportunity to enter in more details in the next tab. And so please, this is a open, open space for you to type in what you need to type in to be able to really detail what is going on. This is also, an opportunity to provide whatever additional information that you think would be useful. Better to include more than less. Next tab we'll look at is the issue type. So you want to, towards the end of the call, as you've sorted out, after you've sorted out the voter's question and helped the voter, please select one or more of the issue types. This really helps us understand the overall voting landscape in a state or county and be able to search for all tickets pertaining to a certain issue. You actually won't be able to submit the ticket without submitting at least one issue type. So for example, if you had a polling place location like we saw in Minnesota in the 2012 election, where there was no voter ID requirement, the elderly Hmong voters were asked for voter ID, while the white male voter behind them, when he pulled out his ID getting ready to be processed after the Hmong voters were taken care of through the line, the poll workers actually told the white male voter to put away his ID because it wasn't needed. So here you would end up clicking off, like it could be a polling place issue, a voter ID issue. You could even say that might be intimidation, and if you include the issue detail, then we would be able to sort out sort of what the next steps might be. So then finally, you can ask the voter for some final information. This is sort of where you can explain how what we're trying to do is help voters, but also identify trends and problems. And so we're collecting this additional information to make sure that we have the best understanding of what's going on. Please figure out who you're talking to, right? Is it the voter themselves? Is it somebody who's helping the voter? Is it actually an election protection volunteer? Or we've had calls from poll workers themselves with questions. And then with the last two questions, we on a API vote hotline, it's very important for us to both figure out race and how they heard about the hotline. Once again, if you are answering on a language line, you can enter in the language in the details section and bypass the race question. But we also have the English language line, and if you help out on that line, then that would be a place where you would want to ask the race question for sure. So, and then you will get to a finalized screen with a summary of the data you enter. Everything that is blank is in red, just to flag that you haven't actually entered the information. So you can double check whether you actually meant to not include that information, or if you have it on hand to actually add. And then finally, you have your resolve and escalate buttons, as you will see on the screen right here. If you've resolved the issue, the voter has what they need, then you hit the resolve button, and then you can regroup and then get ready for your next call. You hit the escalate button when there's follow-up that's required to help that individual. So this is, it's something you had kicked up to me or Christine, or, somebody needs to follow up with the voter, say, you need to call the election officials. One of the call captain needs to call the election officials and then get back to them, and so forth. And then once you are done, after you've finished, you're ready to move on to the next one and hit the start over for your next call. You can also reopen a ticket if you need to, right? If you end up, let's say somebody calls back, they thought they had what they needed, and then they called back and said, hey, I called earlier, I thought I had resolved this, but it's actually still happening or something. You can either reopen the same ticket if it's I thought I resolved this, but the problem is still happening, or you can say start a new ticket. I resolved it. I'm now at the right polling place, but now they're telling me this, and that would be a new ticket for that same phone number. Okay. I also mentioned that there was a third possibility that somebody might not be willing to give their phone number over. So this could be their poll monitor polling place, or they just simply don't want to give a number. You just click cannot get a phone number. Poll monitors may be calling in to get your help documenting issues or for assistance answering questions. You don't actually want their phone numbers listed in that voter's phone number section, right? Because that's not, they're just helping, they're just trying to get some information. But if in the course of the conversation, if you happen to get the voter's phone number, please fill it in. If not, just please indicate the poll monitor's info in the issues detail section, but not in the field asking for contact info for the voter themselves. That way we can get back in touch with them if we need to, but the ticket isn't created, associating it with the poll monitor, but it'll still be associated with the actual voter. So everything else then would proceed as it did with the other tickets as we had just gone through. So that is our Vote Live in a nutshell, and you'll get more comfortable with it as you're able to use it more, but it's rather intuitive, and of course we are there to help if you have any questions or have any concerns. So you will have a toolbox on your computer, and you'll be able to, and if you are on your phone, basically if you have internet access, you'll be able to use the toolbox. You can click through the links for our call center, and then it'll have resources for different states, and you'll be able to really drill down and get information that you need. So, for example, for each state, you'll have a link for frequently asked questions, a voter registration lookup tool, polling place lookup tool, an electionary, right, a dictionary of election terms. And we'll be going over these pieces next. So, once again, if you have internet access, you can actually go to the website, which is hyperlinked on this image, and show volunteers. This is how you would actually be able to get into information and figure out whether or not people are registered. That is a question that we get often on the calls. Am I registered? Where should I go vote? What time is my polling place open? And the like. So there are some states where we're not actually able to look up voters' information for them in a voter lookup tool like this, either because the state does not provide a tool, or there might be language on a web page that indicates that only an individual voter may use the tool for him or herself. So as a third person, you can't actually go in and use it for them. And so the folks at Election Protection have already reviewed the language on the different various websites, and it's noted in the toolbox for that state if it's a state where the voter themselves actually needs to get the information, and in those toolboxes, they'll tell you as a volunteer what you should do instead. So the FAQs, as I mentioned, is a document that you will find particularly useful on election day as you're trying to answer people's questions. So it has very common questions that we see. Right? And because this information differs state to state, and sometimes even county to county, it'll be important to look it up each time. Do not assume because you answered a question for somebody, even in the same state, that it's still the same rules. It's always better just to double check, confirm, and get them that information, each time that you're asked. So the FAQ should really be your first resource because it also includes instructions about when you should flag an issue for your captain or what to tell the voter. And then as a backup, if you can't find it there or if it seems not up to date, you can try the state or county elections website. Sometimes you'll have to go down to the county city level info about a municipal or county election. So, when should you flag the captain? Here are some instances that you should be flagging a captain, right? One, when the answer isn't in your materials. Two, you aren't 100% sure of an answer for a voter. Three, an issue is complex. Four, a report is particularly concerning. And as I mentioned before, if for whatever reason you're uncomfortable with that call, please make sure to come find one of the call captains. And make sure to grab your captain before you actually hang up the phone, especially if you plan to escalate a ticket. That way the captain will have a chance to interact with the voter to collect any additional information they think they'll need to help resolve the issue. Here are some examples of specific issues that can come up that should involve a captain. Machines are broken down at a polling place. Poll workers are asking for ID. That's not required by law, so similar to the Minnesota example I shared. Poll workers are not offering voters provisional ballots when they should be. If there's police presence at the polling place, that's been used as a voter intimidation tactic and should and can be stopped. And as I said, you just aren't sure of an answer. Accuracy is our priority, so we'd rather really just make sure that we have the right answers going out to the voters. So issues that you can handle. So these are some examples: where to vote or checking registration status, which we discussed previously. Questions about voter ID requirements. Someone calls and says, hey, I live in such and such state, or this is my address. Do I need to bring a voter ID to the polls? You will be able to look up to say, yes, your state has a requirement for voter ID, and here are the different IDs that are accepted. Or no, your state doesn't have a voter ID requirement, and you should not be asked. You can even let them know if they do ask you, please do call us back, and we're happy to help you with that. Voters who have moved since registering, you'll find information about that voter where, for example, they should go vote. So different locations have, different states, different counties have different rules. If you've moved in a certain day, they might have you go back to your old polling place, or they might have you go to your new one. All that information will be in your toolbox. Once again, they might ask where the polling place location is, and basic information on provisional ballots, which you can also find in the resources that we've discussed. Some issues that require assistance that you would want to pick up to one of your call captains. When the poll workers themselves are the problem, they could be giving wrong information about ID requirements. They could be confused about provisional ballot requirements. Could be machine breakdowns. They could be denying people the right to bring in somebody of their choosing to help them at the polling place. They could even be hostile. They could be, we have unfortunately heard of, not often, rare occasion, but we have heard of poll workers, making racist comments to voters. So we definitely want to make sure that those are flagged and escalated to the call captains. Finally, any questions that you can't answer with FAQ should also, be bringing in a captain. So again, some of the common issues that we've seen: where do I vote? Where's my polling place? Where can I vote early? Am I registered to vote? How do I vote? Register to vote? I never received my absentee ballot. How do I get an absentee ballot, and how can someone vote abroad? So we're going to go through quickly some of the common election issues and the basic parameters around them. But once again, remember, you will have more detailed information about how this plays out in each state and in localities. If there are differences by localities in that state, all of that information will be at your fingertips. So again, registration rules vary by state. Look it up. Don't guess or assume. Registration deadline. Be clear about when it's postmarked versus when the receipt date is with respect to deadline. When people, talking about people who have moved, felony convictions, right? Some states allow individuals to vote while serving time in prison for felony convictions. And then on the other end of the spectrum, state might bar anybody with a past felony conviction from voting for life. And then, there is a a wide spectrum in between those two, extreme instances, and so you will be able to find that information. And then again, verifying the caller's registration status. Another common issue is the registration is not found. So you'll want to confirm that the voter is registered at that precinct. You can do that by going to the state registration lookup website. As we had mentioned, you want to find out, has the voter actually moved since they last voted? When was the last time they voted? Are they potentially on an inactive list? Encourage the voter to vote at the correct polling place, otherwise the ballot may not count. And if all else fails, a voter can cast a provisional ballot, i.e. the fail-safe ballot. For voter ID, for first-time voters, there may be different ID requirements for voters who are voting for the first time in their precinct or state versus voters who have voted before while living at their current home address. Different states have different requirements as to what form of ID a voter must show at a polling place, if the voter needs to show an ID at all. So the strictest versions require specific types of government-issued photo ID, like a driver's license or a passport. Sometimes a passport doesn't even qualify because it doesn't have your address on it. A more expansive list of photo IDs, which may include a Costco card with a photo, or an employee or student ID, and then other instances where various types of documents that indicate your name and address will be allowed, such as utility bills, a government check, and the like. So whether the address on a voter's photo ID needs to match the address at which they're registered to vote also varies by state, and whether a voter can use an expired ID. So I think that important to note that, that the different states clearly have different rules. So it'll be important to just utilize your tools, your toolkit and resources. And once again, if you are not entirely sure, please find one of the call captains and confirm and check in with them. So voters who have a disability or prefer speaking a non-English language can receive assistance at the polling place from a person of the voter's choice, such as a friend, family member, or a poll worker. A voter cannot receive assistance, though, from his or her employer or a union representative, but otherwise there are no restrictions. The assister, that is the person who's assisting the voter, can enter the voting booth with the voter if that is what the voter prefers. And this is a right protected by Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act. You can advise callers of this right, and you should flag your captain if the caller attests that the election officials or the poll worker is prohibiting or pushing back on the voter receiving such assistance. So what you would want to do if a poll worker, if the call is about a poll worker denying such a, the voter his or her right to assistance of their choice, sometimes election officials or poll workers are just not aware about Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act. And so a captain can help make sure that the poll worker is actually aware of the right, and can sometimes talk to the poll worker and explain what the right is under the Voting Rights Act, and and have that voter be allowed to bring in their assister of the choice. And if it's a more persistent problem, then we can elevate that and potentially call the elections official, the elections office, to note that there is a poll worker violating the Federal Voting Rights Act. Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act is actually the provision that requires some counties to provide translation of all voting materials and provide bilingual poll workers in one or more language. This provision of assistance is dictated by a formula, and the last determination was made in December of 2016. So let one of your call captains know if the caller is struggling to vote because their polling place has not provided a sufficient level of translated materials or interpretation service, and we can follow up on that. And we do have resources that lay out which jurisdictions were covered for which Asian languages, so that you'll know, whether or not that person is calling from a place that's supposed to provide such assistance. We also have links to in-language resources. The Election Assistance Commission also has both voter guides and frequently asked questions themselves, and a glossary of election terms in the languages noted below. You can either go to the Election Assistance Commission's website, or you can go to Advancing Justice AAJC's website, where we have links to the Election Assistance Commission's in-language resources. Advancing Justice AAJC also has a series of fact sheets, both around Section 203 and 208 in various Asian languages. And so if you need, if you're trying to help a voter in that language, and it would be more helpful to have the language already translated for you, where you can read and explain what rights are afforded under those sections, you can reference these fact sheets to provide you that already pre-vetted language. And then APIA Vote also has a series of in-language resources, both an in-language page for those languages noted on the PowerPoint, as well as some other language resources, I believe some of their mailers and so forth. And all of these, of course, will be accessible at your computers. And then finally, another issue with GSA is around electioneering. Electioneering itself is talking to or handing info to a voter to persuade her to vote a certain way or for a certain individual. I'm sure you've all seen that at polling places when you've gone to vote. There is, by law, a buffer zone from the door of the polling place or voting room, and it depends on the state as to what that buffer zone is. And in that, voters themselves may be allowed to wear campaign T-shirts, buttons when they go in to vote, but also it depends on the state, as much of this does. And so certainly one thing that has just come up in Houston is we've heard about poll workers who have deemed people who are assisting voters under Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act. They've tagged them with the same electioneering kind of rule, which we believe is completely against and not in compliance with law. So efforts are being made to fix that. We've heard that from a number of different colleagues in different states, that there's this effort to try to keep people who are assisting voters further away from the polling place as they do folks who are electioneering. And so certainly if you hear something about that, please make sure to elevate that to your captains. Other times when you should sound the alarm, or IE or AKA flag a captain, would be to, if you hear about polls that are opening late or close early. We've gotten calls from people who have said, hey, I'm here at my polling place, it's supposed to be open, but nobody's here. You hear anything about voter intimidation, whether it's police presence, or you hear, people harassing voters outside, saying, hey, are you eligible to vote? Are you a citizen? Things like that. If you hear anything about deceptive information, we've heard campaigns in the past where you've seen, flyers or robocalls being made that say Republicans vote on Tuesday and Democrats vote on Wednesday, and things like that. We've also heard of calls that have been made that said, hey, the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidate, whatever, the candidate of your choice already has this in the bag. You don't, rest assured, you don't actually have to go vote. So anything like that, definitely flag the captain so that we can elevate that issue. And then finally, anytime a voter's right to vote is challenged, certainly let us know so we can help intervene. So on the voter challenges or intimidation issue, I mentioned there could be rude or hostile poll workers or harassment of voters who do not speak English well, or we've heard about limited English proficient voters being segregated into a line where there's an English only line and then a language line, if you will. So definitely record as much detail as possible into OVL and tell a captain, and then we will talk to the highest level election official in charge and make sure that that is addressed ASAP. I briefly mentioned the concern about whether or not the poll is open. If it's not open, that's something that we can certainly also, that should be picked up In the past, when polls have opened late, we've been able to get the polls to stay open later than it was supposed to make up for opening up late. And then other problems that might arise is problems with the electronic poll book, polls closing early, and long lines. Finally, just to touch on provisional ballots quickly, why would a voter be given a provisional ballot? If there's a question about voters' eligibility, they don't have the proper ID, they're in the wrong polling place, check your state's FAQs to find out what to do if a voter is asked to vote provisionally. So some potential issues can be for poll workers failing to make sure that the provisional ballot envelope is complete, poll workers failing to provide a toll-free number that allows the voter to verify whether their ballot was counted as required by the Help America Vote Act, election officials who wrongly issue provisional ballots or do not issue one at all, even though required by law. So remember, should make sure that the voter is in the correct precinct or polling location. Make sure that the voter is informed of next steps if voting provisionally because of ID requirements. Could be that they need to show back up at their county clerk's office to provide that ID within a certain time frame or whatnot. Once again, refer to your FAQs. They'll let you know what is needed. And then make sure that the voter actually verifies whether that provisional ballot was counted. So these are the contact information that I had mentioned earlier. Please do contact me or Christine if you have any questions leading up into next Tuesday. Not sure if we have, I have time, but I know I started late. So if folks are still on and have some questions, we can try to answer them. Otherwise, you can shoot your questions over and we'll make sure to respond as quickly as possible. And with that, I'll turn that back over. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Terry. Does anyone on the call right now have any questions before we all hop off? Any questions?
Hi, we're wondering what a provisional ballot is.
Okay, a provisional ballot is a paper ballot used by a voter when there is some problem in establishing a voter's eligibility. So it's not the actual ballot. It's a ballot that's given when there's questions about whether a voter is eligible to vote. So at a minimum, a voter should never be turned away from a polling place without being offered a provisional ballot if that voter thinks they are actually registered and eligible to vote. Now, that ballot will only be counted if the election officials actually determine that the person was in fact entitled to vote. So that's why it's provisional. But that's, as I mentioned previously, that's the fail-safe. So if they've gone through the different efforts to try to confirm and they can't at the actual, time of at the polling place itself, then they'll vote provisionally, and then depending on the issue and whether or not, as I mentioned, the voter has to take a couple extra steps to, for example, confirm their identity or whatnot, then that ballot could be counted once it's been proven that that voter is actually eligible to vote.
Thank you.
And yes, we'll make sure to share the PowerPoint with the volunteers after the call.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions before we close out? Right. Well, thank you so much, Terry, for your time, and thank you everybody for volunteering for the hotline. And if there are any questions, go ahead and contact Terry or Christine, and we will be sending out the PowerPoint after the webinar. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.